Welcome to Cinemophile, where we bring you the best in independent, documentary, and foreign films, and we talk to the people who made them. I'm your host, Mike Caspar, and you can find out more about the program by going to cinemophilepod.com. The film is called Skin of Youth. It is set in the shadowy underworld of Saigon in the 1990s. The film follows San, a transgender sex worker, navigating desire, survival, and the fight for self-determination, all while a dangerous oligarch closes in on her relationship with her underground cage fighter lover. Skin of Youth has a kind of noir feel to it. In the telling of the story, it is about their love for one another and the lengths that they're willing to go to see it through. Skin of Youth also provides us with an opportunity to spend time in a culture and a country that many of us are not familiar with, a united Vietnam. The actress Tran Quan is fantastic as the lead character in the film, San. The film has a great look to it. Our guest today is the director and writer, Ash Mayfair. Her first film, The Third Wife, won over 20 awards and played in more than 70 film festivals. Once again, the film is called Skin of Youth, and we're joined today by the director and writer, Ash Mayfair. Ash, welcome to Cinemophile.
Thank you for having me.
Well, and thank you so much for being here. The things that I love about Skin of Youth are many. I love the look of the film. As I was mentioning, it's kind of a noirish looking film. I thought Tran Nguyen as San was wonderful, did a wonderful job with that role. The supporting cast is excellent. The look of the film, as I said, I keep coming back to that, but it is a beautiful look. Skin of Youth falls on the success of The Third Wife. I don't know how much pressure you felt in coming up with a new project, but let's go back. Where did the idea for Skin of Youth come from?
So this film has been a really long time coming. My youngest sibling, who is 22 years younger than me, is transgender. And just over the course of, you know, our our time together and watching him grow up, like at 2 years old, he already told me, I'm not a girl, I'm a boy. And I had the privilege to be able to, accompany my sibling on this transitional journey. More than 16 years ago, was when he first told me this information, and I had wanted to educate myself really in order to just share this path. Through that, I met a lot of queer kids in the country. I made it a point to, reach out to the trans community and to learn and to prepare, if not myself, then, help me understand my sibling in some way. And 2018 was when I first decided that so many of these stories that I'm hearing needs to be written down in some ways. And so the moment I finished with my first movie, I started writing. I wasn't sure yet if we would make it a narrative feature, a documentary, or short stories or somehow. But the character became very clear to me. As I lived and worked and share story, and then later on meeting the cast, everything kind of crystallizes. And I wouldn't be lying if I was to say that my cast works, co-writers when it comes to character creation.
Thank you for that. By the way, your first film, The Third Wife, was an award-winning film nominated for, I believe, 3 Spirit Award nominations when it came out. Going back to the origin story for all of this, so your brother transitioned, he has transitioned into...
Yes, he's come out when he was 16. He sat in the audience when the film premiered in New York. The kid was the biggest motivator for me, the biggest reason why I did this movie.
And I think for most people who will see the film, this is a part of the human experience that few of us have had any experience with. And as someone watching this film, one of the strengths, one of the things that I kept coming back to is it contextualizes this life experience that San is on in a way that gives it the dramatic character arc as well as demystifies much of this. And I think a lot of it has to do with the people in her life, not only with Nam, but also with his grandmother, the other people that she works with. There are certainly characters in the film that present huge challenges to her getting what she wants to do, making that happen. But I like that there are a lot of positives regarding the people who are in her life. Having said that, there are also tremendous barriers that they face, given that they are very poor. They come from a part of society where they struggle to make ends meet, to put food on their table. A lot of the issues around poverty and wealth are addressed in this film, and I do want to talk about that because in the course of the film we meet Mr. Vong, and he is the oligarch who is controlling so much of the story, especially when it comes to Nam, but he impacts her story as well. Let's talk a little bit about how that plays out.
Of course, and thank you for bringing that forward. To me, is Skin of Youth is about a marginalized community, right? That is at the core of the story. But what the marginalized community and the queer kids experience is not just discrimination. It can also come from poverty. So socially, it's very hard for people who transition in Vietnam, for example, to like obtain a job, because your government ID cannot reflect the gender that you want to live in. And it's still not really possible for many of these girls to have surgery in the country, for example. They would have to obtain hormones that are hand carried from Thailand, and there's like all sort of kind of back alley situations that may happen. So in terms of the social commentary, I am talking about something that is actually very old, that is, that the disadvantage that many of these kids have to endure come from an unjust society.
Yeah.
And whether this lack of justice is through governance or perspective or prejudice, this exists in every country.
Yes, that is obviously a very important part of the story. As you said, the institutions that throw up the barriers for people who want to make these kind of changes in their life. Another thing about this film that I thought was just masterfully put together in the way that you told the story, because the film does focus primarily, well, it focuses on them as a couple at the beginning of the film, San and Nam. And then it begins to break up into their individual stories and how they love each other, how they want the best for each other. That's the other thing, the humanity of the film, the characters in the film. They really are loving, and they're doing everything they can to make a better life for themselves. But the way you structure the film, I thought it's a real journey that we're on, and to see them kind of tell their own stories individually as we move forward, and then all of these things kind of come back together as the film moves forward. I thought you just did a wonderful job of pulling just the storytelling part of this film.
From the very beginning, I knew that San, her story would be at the heart of this film. But I had a conversation with a friend of mine who had transitioned many, many years ago. I worked with her when, I was a baby, like assistant, working in television in Vietnam. And, she told me, yeah, so I saved up all those years. I had my surgery, and then I wanted more. I wanted an actual partner. I wanted to be a mother. I wanted a family. Like, I wanted to be able to, just use my actual name. on my ID. And that conversation stuck with me over the years because I realized that, a lot of our focus as as writer, director, or filmmakers is often central around the kind of drive towards the transitional, like the physical surgery and like the reaction of people around that character. And my friends' words just resonated with me. That is a really important part for someone in, the community, but there's also so much more about life and about the desires of these young people. And so it wasn't a concrete structure, so to speak, when I thought of writing the screenplay. I just knew that given time, these young people,
Mhm.
are going to have needs and will have passions, and if I put them in the room long enough, something will happen. And what happened was that they wanted a family, and they try to create an unconventional family,
Yeah.
but in this particular society, unfortunately, that model of an unconventional family is not sustainable, and that's where the tragedy of the story lies.
One of the characters in the film is the grandmother, who is this loving and accepting person who loves Nam, wants him to be happy, is completely aware of the relationship that he shares with San. And I loved her. I thought she was just such a warm and in some ways surprising character in the film. So I thought she was great.
Thank you. It was surprising to me too because she was based on my grandmother. My grandmother, I was living with her while I was making the movie. She passed away, like halfway through the shoot. And we had talked about my brother. We talked about my sibling, and there was still resistance to his transition, like within the kind of larger family unit that we share. But my grandma was laying there and she was like, just let the kid do whatever they want. So what if he wants to go to see a doctor or like take hormone or whatever, like, why would you forbid a child from this? And I was so surprised because my grandma grew up, with like third grade education. She worked as like a kindergarten teacher for a while. She worked as like a coal miner for a while. It's an insane history. But she chose love and she saw that like ultimately that doesn't really matter. And so many other people in our society can't see or are not willing to open their heart to that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, well, and that's interesting the way you brought that up because a member of my family came out many years ago, and my parents' reaction was, I don't think it was that they didn't love her, is that they were worried about the ramifications in a kind of in a social way, what how difficult it would make her life.
I
And
would be lying if I said that I didn't also experience the same fear.
yeah,
When my sibling came out, I was very scared. Um, but I am even more proud to have had the trust and to be able to support my sibling in, in this way, through the creation of the film, through, the uh, being a listening ear and giving this young person what they need in order to just trust themselves. Yeah, so like the grandmother, a lot of people actually also mentioned her to me, and she is basically my grandma, really, in that respect.
I just want to quickly remind our audience we're speaking with Ash Mayfair. She is the director and writer of a terrific film called Skin of Youth, and it's coming out here in the United States, being released through Film Movement, and that's on June 26th. I'll ask you, do you have theatrical bookings lined up?
I don't believe in that we do in the US. We have released theatrically in Japan because this was a co-production with Japan and Singapore. And we're working on getting a theatrical release in Vietnam, hopefully soon.
Oh yeah, that was a question I was going to ask. Has this film been seen in Vietnam? And I will ask you, you're in your bio, you're listed as living in Los Angeles and Ho Chi Minh City. Obviously, the history between Vietnam and the United States is, to say the least, fraught. That would be a kind way of putting it. Disastrous, and another way to put it. Um, what is it like in Vietnam now? What are your kind of in terms of the economy, the governance, the scar of this horrific war that was visited upon Vietnam for many, many, many years? How's Vietnam doing?
Growing up, the war was what put Vietnam on the map internationally for so many people, right? And so I left when I was 13, 14 years old. And my classmate would only know of my country through the war. But I'm really happy
Good,
to observe that internationally this perspective has changed a lot. Like
good.
culturally, there's so many good Vietnamese artists, filmmakers, storytellers, visual artists, writers everywhere,
Good,
um,
good.
creating work that are really groundbreaking. It's partly why I wanted to make both of my features in the country with young Vietnamese people and a young Vietnamese team. Because I was inspired and, like very much moved by this effort to transform themselves and consequently the identity of a country culturally. I do think though that there is a gap between the, social and legal structure and what the young people want and need. I think this is not a very simple situation because I think artists in Vietnam would do so well if they receive more support.
Hmm. Hmm.
And this is not something that's very easy to come by. We have little to no government support for funding.
Hmm.
We always like kind of try to make things on our own, take films to festival on our own, and so on
Yeah.
and so forth, and through the development too. So in the region, I think Vietnam is worth paying attention to because of the talent, but the social structure is not quite there yet.
In terms of the integration of the South and the North, because they were separated for decades, and during the course, especially during the course of the conflict, first between the French and then the United States. And is that better? I mean, have they sort of the North-South divide been broken down in
I'm
some?
really, I'm really glad you brought this up, because my first film, The Third Wife, was a love letter to the North, where my grandparent came from, and the story was based on my great grandmother's life. Skin of Youth is my love letter to the South, and particularly to Saigon, where
Right.
I was born and where I grew up. I think there's definitely a sense, like there is a cultural difference for sure, and is very subtle and is so interesting. It's endlessly fascinating for me because, I would share with you, as a child, I would go to school and speak Vietnamese in a southern accent. And then I would go home and speak Vietnamese with a northern accent because that's what my mom and dad spoke. But I've lived in Ho Chi Minh City my whole life. And I've traveled the entire country in order to like location scout and cast and work. And, there's this like understanding, not quite so much a political divide, but very much like a cultural shift. Um, and that I think is a really beautiful thing.
I don't know the scale of the differences, but you could say the same thing about America. The difference between the South, that we describe the South, and the North, and the Midwest and the West. there are definitely cultural differences, outlooks on life, a tolerance level for people, and all kinds of different ways. And even to the point where you're speaking in, where you're talking about the emphasis on an access in the North and access in the South. That's absolutely true here. And I mean, there are certainly vast differences in terms of our history, but we suffered a civil war. We went through a civil war that was devastating. So anyway, I don't want to go too far down that road, but that's interesting. I'm glad to hear that you feel that the country is alive and hopefully transitioning into what it will become as soon as it can. And well, this is just fascinating. I really I can't emphasize enough just how well done Skin of Youth is, and as a story, as a storyteller, as a film, and a window into many different aspects of our lives, sexually, our love, family, tradition. Film really does a wonderful job of bringing that all to our attention. And my congratulations to you, Ash Mayfair, for your work as director and writer of Skin of Youth. Once again, the film will be released here in the United States beginning on June 26th, and it's being released through Film Movement, and you can go to filmmovement.com to find out how you can watch Skin of Life. Ash Mayfair, thank you.
Thank you, Mike. It's been a pleasure.
You have been listening to Cinemophile with Mike Kaspar, the place where you will hear from the best in independent documentary and foreign filmmakers. Please check out our previous interviews as well as upcoming interviews and special programming by going to cinemophilepod.com. We are also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, searchable under Cinemophile with Mike Kaspar. Until next time, thank you for listening.